But to look into the future, many decades into the future, to look into the past. And here's an image which is a anime, right, from the 1997 anime series, which I highly recommend if you understand social dynamics amongst men and finding your purpose and things like that. There are many deep themes in it. It's from Berserk, Berserk, the 1997 version. It's only about 20-25 episodes. I think it's on Netflix too, but definitely a classic. Many deep themes of understanding life for yourself. And when I see this image, and there's many other images there of them kind of hanging around in tribes. So essentially how they work are, they're a group of mercenaries. They're very, essentially operate like a tribe, a very highly efficient group of men. They stick together. They don't really answer to anyone. They don't really have any kings and queens to lecture them to what to do. They kind of live on their own terms, separate from society. If you play Metal Gear Solid, there's a whole concept of outer heaven and groups of paramilitary groups of men who are hyper efficient, and they are self-sufficient, independent of the system, and operate that way. Now, when we think about the future of men's work, which we're going to do in a moment here, we're going to think about how do men operate when they're not being constantly isolated, constantly lectured to, whether it's by the left-wing ideology, the woke ideology, by corporate oligarchs, by all this type of government restrictions, media restrictions on free speech and things like this. And I don't mean this, they react in a violent way. What I mean, they react in a very hyper-efficient group of men who work together. And the modern day equivalent of this is how they operate in business. So there's three kind of options for you. Firstly, you can stay with a corporate job and play the game and play the office politics game and maybe put up with a bit of ridiculous woke ideology. And you need to learn to tolerate that if you want to take option one and stay in the corporate world. Now, option two is essentially you become hyper efficient and hyper skilled at a particular niche, and then you can go and work as a contract worker, whether it's for your own individual clients or working for corporations when it's convenient at a high daily contract rate. Now, some people do that. And then there's option number three. Now, option number three is where you take your skills, you operate again independently as a man, but you work with others. Now, the modern day equivalent of this tribe you can see in front of you would be an organization of men who are building a business. They operate on a decentralized basis across the world, and what they would do effectively is collaborate to run an organization. Now, that could be a social media marketing agency, which is a bit of a popular trend, along with drop shipping and things like that. But the whole idea is you have to become highly skilled, operate independent of your kind of collapsing Western society, operate in such a way that you're so skilled the layoffs aren't impacting you because you can have your own clients, and working with other men who are also highly skilled in their field. So I know example of a social media marketing agency whereby it's run by someone in their mid-20s who is in Miami, and he's been quite successful running Instagram theme pages and things like that. But he also has co-business owners that are based all over the world who are also highly skilled YouTube who live in. Then he has contacts in rural parts of America who are also highly skilled in marketing and other platforms like Twitter. And they essentially have a team of 3 to 5 people, work on sales, getting new clients for their marketing agency, have a outsourced kind of admin team that works in the Philippines. So you have this one guy who's in his mid-20s in Miami who runs the agency primarily. He has highly skilled experts in the UK and Bulgaria, also in Texas, and then he has an outsourced team in Philippines, and then he has salespeople all over the world who have kind of similar ambitions of him of building this kind of independent business. And that's the modern version of this. But in 2025, you need to be able to adapt to that. Right, adapt to a new workplace, a new source of income, whether that's, saving your money, setting up a rental income in your home country, moving abroad to work on your own business. You've got to really think outside the box. So let's understand this kind of concept of being nomadic, living independent of the system, being highly skilled, and working with other people who have shared values, shared business goals, and a similar culture of being independent and free of this rigid control system that you see in the West.
These once nomadic tribes created an entirely new social paradigm and planted seeds of empires that would come to rule for thousands of years. And this was right at the beginning of the Iron Age. History works in cycles, but according to the Vedic philosophy, the yugas reflect each other, spiraling upwards. To put it really simply, The Bronze Age had a bunch of decentralized tribes and city-states. The Iron Age saw the greatest centralization of power the world has ever seen, especially in something like a one world government, which many people are pushing for. In order to return to a Bronze Age and avoid this dystopia, we need to return back to decentralization again. And I believe that this decentralization movement will be led by the nomads of the new era. Now, I'm no oracle or fortune teller. These are just my ideas as an educated student here. I have no idea what the future will look like, but the general themes I paint are not just plausible, they are likely to me. Because for many people out there, especially the restless and brave ones, this is the only hopeful path left to them. Most people sense something is wrong. They feel numb. They feel frustrated and sick. The greatest and most capable of the younger generations find themselves retreating or silently rebelling against all of modernity. I know I and most of my friends are fed up with the backwardsness of the modern world. All the things that make us uniquely human, like having a connection with nature, having a connection with one another, and having a cause that we believe in, have all gone away. While big banking, big tech, big government, big pharma sees greater and greater control over an atomized people. And when
So this is an interesting concept, right? So firstly, when we think about who the nomadic people of these days, right? And I know that sometimes there's positive and negative stereotypes about them, but the whole concept of digital nomads, which is basically people who work online, they have an online income source, whether they're freelancing, maybe they're web developers, video editors, marketing experts, things like that. And the thing is, they do create this new social paradigm where they're decentralized, right? And they're not to the country that they're in. If the country that they're living in, say someone moves from the UK to Thailand and there's some issue in Thailand with the government and it's unstable, they can just move from Thailand to Bali and then go and work online or move to another country because that's their key income source, right? It's like a nomadic farmer, a farmer who can go to new lands, grow his own crops and live his life in peace away from all this coercive government control. Now, this is quite funny because some of this concept of decentralization are things I remember discussing early on in my career, it's partly in reference to crypto, but also in reference to how people work, right? Because this is the interesting concept because the core idea here is freedom, right? Whereas when you think about the core idea of this system, it's really a control grid, a control system that people are so ingrained into, they're not thinking of it of like, how can you actually make money and operate independent of the system? And this is like a key concept we're going to cover further here.
Frontier. In fact, millions of them already are. The best among the new generations become entrepreneurs or nomads, trying to pave a new way for themselves and a tribe. They are the self-sovereign creators, founders, entrepreneurs, and digital nomads, and there are millions of them spread out globally, and their numbers are only going to increase. This new direction towards decentralized communities is not a want for most people I talk to. It's a need. People need to have community. They need shared purpose. They need to feel like they have a stake in this world in order to feel like they are a part of something bigger. Without love, without belonging, without human excellence and camaraderie, and without higher meaning, what's the point of all this? What's the point of life? This is the question I just can't get past anymore. And people who have a higher taste for life feel this pain of modernity most keenly. Hence, they will be the leaders of something new.
Like I say, modern warfare these days is business and entrepreneurship and making money and being independent of the system. In the past, it was those roaming band of mercenaries like we saw earlier who want to be independent of this kind of system and this control grid. So like I said, entrepreneurs, content creators, things like that. And what you mentioned here about people needing community and purpose, that's really deeply ingrained into humans. Now you hear all the times that people are more isolated than ever, particularly men. People are kind of have a loneliness epidemic. You've probably heard that term too. And the thing is, what unites people, right? It's having common values, common goals, which, like I say, in this case would be business goals, and a similar culture. And I know that might take some time to develop, but I do think we do see these, like it says, nomadic tribes of people who are roaming together who have the similar beliefs. I gave the example earlier of a marketing agency that operates globally in quite a lean terms. They're not like a massive organization. They're just very highly skilled individuals, about 4 or 5 people, and an outsourced team in the Philippines who help with some of the admin aspects of it. The point is that people are united by this purpose. And what's quite interesting to focus on that example is that not only do they have the same business goals, they do have the same kind of culture, quite focused on health and wellness. They're very picky in terms of being an ethical business, in terms of who they help, in terms of their marketing agency. They want to focus on people who are kind of sharing the truth, people who are focused on whether that's health or business with some level of ethics, not exploiting the resources or lying to people and being manipulative, which you see all the time online. Looking for that kind of deeper meaning in life do come from values and goals that are aligned. And that's what this type of option offers, even though it takes some time to kind of figure it out and build that. And that's why the first step is kind of building yourself as a man in the sense of who you are, what you want. That takes a lot of time in solitude, in reflection, focusing where you are in your life, where do you want to go? Because I think the reality for most people, particularly most men, you're kind of stuck in a position where you're probably not where you want to be in life, or not where you thought you'd be, or what this system sold you. Many people who thought they would own a house and have a wife and a couple kids right now are probably stuck in a job where they're not sure if it's stable, don't know about their long-term future. People are having a very hard time predicting where they're going to be and planning ahead. So my key lesson to you is to really spend that time alone, build yourself in terms of who you want to be, figure out what you want, and build a skill set that can support that. I've given a few examples before about the type of skills you can develop in terms of this. And when it comes down to that, instead of just forcing yourself and throwing yourself maybe into the corporate world or that kind of socializing with co-workers and things like that, take the opposite approach. Focus on self-sufficiency, building your own greatness, being loyal to your true values, glorifying your own values, which in many ways your values and your goals might be the opposite of a corporate job. So you need to be able to kind of be comfortable in that unstable space between where you currently are and where you want to be. And that takes some time and kind of deep thinking and reflection to develop. Because not only are you just developing a skill for a business, you're kind of reorganizing how your life will operate if you are dependent on your self-employment income.
This has happened in China, this happened in India, this happened in Greece, this happened all over Europe. I think this says something about nomadism more than anything else. You see, people who go on their own adventure have a higher thirst for life, but they also tend to be healthier. The pastoralists of the past, the horse and cattle people, often fasted. They lived hardier lives. They traveled long distances and had to survive and thrive through the elements. Hence, they became more warlike. They became more vital. And Nietzsche believed that our actions and our philosophy and our morality is a direct consequence of the vitality of our biology. You see, when you have more physical strength and energy, you want to go discharge that strength. You want to go discharge that energy into open spaces to master. The monkeys seek to master the canopies. The mouse seeks to master the undergrowth. And humans will seek to master the space around them, whether that is an intellectual space, a science or art frontier, whether that is a physical space. We can think of Magellan.
So just to go over this, right, when it comes to man's nature, one of our key drivers is to dominate, which you just can't really do in this society. You can't exhibit kind of dominant characteristics, particularly in the workplace, because you might be interpreted as being aggressive and someone that is pushing your values or pushing your work style on other people. You have to be very soft and effeminate, as I say, right? And if you look at society being weaker and corrupted in terms of the values, it's very difficult to find that kind of deeper spiritual meaning in your work, because it is kind of somewhat meaningless, right? And then what ends up happening is you become ruled by the dominant culture. And in your country, the dominant culture, you look at the UK, Canada, America, so a lot of the dominant culture is not really something you can align with or you feel too happy to work with. When you go to your corporation, do you feel like the company you work at, do you feel like you align with those values? Do you feel really deeply ingrained in the work, or is it just something you're doing to earn some money, right? The way I see it is there's a bit of a lack of adventure, exploration, and kind of being able to express yourself openly as a man, or really pursue a sense of adventure. And a lot of that nowadays will come from being able to, as I say, develop a unique skill set, whether it's being able to travel and live life a bit on the edge. There's an interesting book some of you might have read called Way of the Superior Man, which is kind of delving deeper into what brings a man kind of fulfillment. And a lot of that is adventure, is taking the risks, whether it's with your businesses, with your personal life, with developing skills so you can live in a free way from the system, right? And being able to openly conquer new spaces, and essentially being able to dominate and grow. And a lot of ways you can do that now, thanks to the internet, is kind of, like I say, build your skill set and operate somewhat independently of the status quo. And the status quo, you can see, is so obviously misaligned with you, is so obviously going against you or trying to use you to build a world that you don't actually enjoy or want to be part of. If you look at a lot of this ESG rhetoric that everyone has to pretend to go along with if they want to survive in the corporate world or even many government roles, you can see it's all about lowering your living standards. So like, to what extent can you be motivated by a system that's telling you to eat less meat or drink less milk or travel less and 15-minute cities? How motivated can you be to participate and support in that? You'd rather drop out and maybe live more as a minimalist and do your own thing, right? And that's why you see trends like digital nomads who are dropping out the 9 to 5 and trying to make whatever money they can make online, even if it is a bit risky. And this is what you realize about a lot of the firms. You see it with a lot of the major investment banks and big companies. They're like kind of dinosaurs. They're super inefficient. They're all about control. And the industry, any industry, is rife and open to disruptors, right? In the sense of a parallel economy. All this type of inefficient, failing education system, there's an alternative that you can build for yourself as a private tutor. There's failing financial systems, there's alternatives like fintech and crypto.
Vitality, this thirst for the mastery of open spaces. And the thing about open space is that open space is full of danger. It is full of adversity. It is full of the unknown. Hence, it is where masculinity is born and where masculinity thrives. Just think, if you put a band of men, of just strangers, into the wilderness, what would happen? They would become a band of brothers very quickly in their quest to master the space around them, to accumulate resources and create a safe haven where women can come, right? So men band together into hunting bands or war bands or adventure parties when they go into the dangers of open space. This is why masculinity flourished in places like the Wild West, this crazy, dangerous, unregulated space that attracted a lot of men and gold miners and people who wanted an adventure. Masculinity thrived in ancient Germanic tribes all across Europe. Masculinity thrived in the Roman Empire, where they were constantly expanding their borders. Masculinity thrived in ancient Athens after they defeated the Persians and created this navy that swept across the Mediterranean. The expansion of space leads to an explosion in culture, and also it leads to the hardiest type of human being. And this is why I think the nomads of today are not only healthier than other people, they have a better shot at creating these decentralized and retribalized communities.
And what we're describing here is quite esoteric, right? And when he's talking about people who are in these tribes, digital nomads, being healthier, firstly, we've got to understand, we're focusing on more positive aspects. There are people who try to make a path for themselves that might not work out and they go back to their standard 9 to 5. But there's a lot of people who can work from home, who do maybe travel and work independently. They do have a healthier mindset, and they're not stuck in this rut that a lot of people are in standard employment situations. They might be healthier because they have healthier spirits, they have more time to focus on themselves and personal growth, whether it's physically and spiritually and things like that. Now, what we've got interesting here is, like I said, this danger and opportunities of entrepreneurship and how that is very aligned with what men want, right? If you look at this image that I shared earlier, I think this is more like an honorable way of living, even if there's life and death risk there. And most men would kind of, on some level, prefer that to that kind of standard archetype of the kind of boring 9 to 5 life, right? Now, this whole drive to conquer, build, grow is kind of the opposite of a corporate job. All jobs are quite restricted, quite restrained. They limit your creativity. You're doing the opposite of conquering. You're kind of maintaining a really failing system, right? You're not building and growing a lot. You might have some growth and development of your skills, but past a point, it's more about just keep playing the office politics game.
Most people just have a job that they kind of been given after college. They eat the same food every day. They do the same things every day. They live a very soft and comfortable and settled lifestyle. As a result, they become weaker almost in every way. While those who are nomadic, who are starting businesses, who are traveling a lot, who are always having to go into new environments, face the unknown, find friends, build community, find success on the internet, find success in their business or in their project, all of these people are becoming stronger and more vital every day. They have all of this new frontier around them. And wherever there's a frontier, men become stronger, women become stronger. And on top of that, they band together. They create decentralized tribes automatically because the tribal unit is the unit that is required to go and master open space. And the mastery of open space, according to Nietzsche and according to BAP, is the deepest driving impulse within the human being and within all of nature. Animals seek to master open space, and so do humans. And if you want to thrive in your life, it's about finding an open space that you can go master.
So this is quite important, right? You know, in what he's talking about, the repeated monotonous life, that is one option you can pick. And in a certain extent, it might be safer in terms of, you know, playing along with this system. And this is what I see with men who I know people who've dropped out of college. I'm not saying it's worked out for everyone, but sometimes if you're hyper efficient and productive and you see how rigged this system is, the earlier you drop out can be a better option for you, right? And you have to embrace that volatility, right? And you have to put aside the life of monotony and a lack of variety for more volatility. That's the kind of trade-off you need to make. And have some goals that you want to conquer. And this whole concept of decentralized tribes is quite interesting because I've noticed this at a more looser kind of framework in places I visited. I visited El Salvador last year, and essentially I noticed this because, you know, obviously many people who have significant amounts of Bitcoin, they might move there, they might buy some land, buy some property, grow their own food, homeschool their kids, things like that. And El Salvador, I have visited there. I know it's got a lot of positive press right now. It is still quite underdeveloped, if I'm honest, compared to other parts of Latin America. They've got a long way to go, even though they've kind of stopped the crime there and made it more safer for many people to visit. That's what is interesting, is that they are operating and they are open and more pro-business. I know there's a particular company that's like kind of a startup through Bitcoin where they have their own sustainable farm, and they provide steak, they provide raw milk, and they sell this for Bitcoin. And this is really a key concept here because people are moving towards that type of direction. People who are more freedom orientated, I see some of them move to parts of Latin America, parts of Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe, things like that, because they want their freedom to express themselves, to run their own businesses, not have to deal with this kind of monopoly oligarchical situation that you have in the West or some countries. People want their own small business, they want to be free, and they're very pro-freedom. And that's what I realized. There's two types of attitudes. People who like run a business, they want to provide a good service. And then you have these major corporations, like I say, you think they're motivated by money and profitability, but it's really about controlling people's daily lives, whether it's their employees that work for them or the consumers that they sell products to. And what's interesting in that dynamic when it comes to pursuing freedom as a man, you know, looking for your future of employment, you need to be very creative. And that's kind of fun when you think about it, because you have to combine low tech, which would be maybe being off grid, being a minimalist, having your own land, growing your own food, with being high tech, whether that's crypto, having coding skills, having some kind of online income. That's kind of interesting concept there, low tech and high tech, and combining them to make good money. And that example of that El Salvador farm where they have for the steak and the raw milk, and they're selling it for Bitcoin, which is the high-tech aspect, right?
The globalists have a history of wiping out people who oppose their great centralization of money, power, and food. Basically, the Leviathan of big banking and the military-industrial complex and big food and big pharma doesn't like anybody exiting their global control and slave state. They hate decentralization because it leads to people and tribes who are sovereign and not easily ruled. Military protection and tech is a question for another video, and I frankly have no idea what's going to happen in the future, but guerrilla warfare has been remarkably successful in the past. Small tribes of ancient German barbarians sacked the Roman Empire like 6 times. Hell, even the Taliban basically defeated America in Afghanistan. As long as there's many decentralized communities with wise leaders trying to go in a different direction, I think there will be success and we'll figure out the problems along the way.
So it's an interesting thing to pause on, but essentially he's true there. What he's talking about, the centralization. You have two pushing agendas: people who are becoming more centralized with a corporate agenda, and people who are pushing for decentralization and living free and independent from the system. And the thing is, you got to decide whether over the long term are you going to fit in. If you're not feeling comfortable with the normies and the NPC types, and they're really getting on your nerves, and you want to go against the grain, then you have to think outside the box for your options, right? And, you know, if you're not willing to tolerate them, realize sooner or later you will be cancelled. You will be an outcast, even if you're not publicly cancelled, like a Russell Brand or someone like that who gets cancelled due to apparently something that happened with a woman several years ago. You'll get cancelled by being slowly outcasted. You'll be on the shortlist for the layoffs, right? Because you're not agreeing and fitting in with everyone and playing the social game. And you see this, like I say, men are dropping out, and there's different ways of living. I'm not saying everyone has to move abroad and own a farm and make money online, but even people who are making alternatives to the current system. You see this with indie gaming. I don't play games a lot, video games, but you know, I noticed there's some men who are kind of seeing all the political correctness and DEI even in video games, so they make their own independent video games, and those tend to be quite successful, and the system's kind of coping and seething about it. So it's interesting how, you know, pursuing the alternatives can work for yourself.
My theory is that these new brotherhoods, like the ancient brotherhoods, will start as nomadic, as digital. They search out for their tribe and their space to master. Then they will set up small breakaway societies across the world. These decentralized hubs of rapid advancement and high-quality people will slowly gain power and influence. This is already happening in many places like Guatemala, Portugal, Bali, and digital nomad hubs across the world. Slowly, they will become more and more independent from big states, and yet more interconnected to each other. The only way these breakaway societies will flourish is not through conquest, but through business, which is the modern equivalent to warfare. Men banding together to compete and acquire resources and also spread a message into the rest of the world. They won't be conquering people directly. Not yet anyway. You see, these tribes won't have to. The Leviathan, or the huge military industrial complexes and empires across the world, are about to enter into extreme turbulence over the next century. It's inevitable at this point. You can see my video on Peter Turchin and the rise of the next Julius Caesar here. But essentially, super complex systems of global shipping and global trade, where your pears are grown in Argentina and packaged in Thailand and shipped to California, these types of systems easily crumble. And all indicators point to a high political and economic instability in the coming years. Once mighty states begin to deteriorate and fall, people will look to any organized force that is independent with power and strong leadership. Always in disasters, warlords have risen to power. These are the gangs of the modern East, the revolutionary political parties of Western history, and the tyrants and despots who seized power in the aftermath of every empire. Hopefully, when chaos brews, these decentralized and strong communities can be a shining symbol of a new way, or at the least, a haven for higher men and women. And this all comes down to whether they are run by wise and virile leaders, which I think they will, since they attract the best sort of men and women. I don't think America or the Leviathan will vanish anytime soon. It will politically transform in the next century, as will the rest of the global powers. And in that, there will be a new opening for a new type of state. And since the fabric of society is so hopelessly broken right now, the decentralized, retribalized state is the only solution. And this is my prediction.
So that's kind of interesting image there, right? Because I think a lot of men do feel that way in the West right now. So, you know, what he's talking about being decentralized is quite important. And I think there's so many different ways of thinking about this when you do have an open mind about it, and you do think about potentially living in lower cost of living locations in the future, or places where you can buy land. You know, I've seen other YouTube channels where people are planning on organizing their own health city, which would be like a city that is fully based for athletes, whether it's the same way you might have an Olympic city, and there might be a location where athletes can train, very focused on natural foods, things like that. All these small communities that can form over time El Salvador's a perfect example there of trying to have people with similar values who are more pro-freedom. And they're not pro-freedom or trying to overthrow the government in that sense. They just want to live life on their own terms. They're not trying to harm anyone, you know. Just to summarize the key points here, you know, you should build skills for self-employment, be comfortable combining high-tech skills with low-tech skills, like I mentioned with the online business and owning your own land, if that's an option that you're interested in. Because eventually, for many men, this system is actively pushing you out through biased hiring and promotion practices, and there'll be a woke ideology. And even if there's a slight pushback right now with Trump winning and the culture's kind of turning against slightly DEI or the gender bias, the long-term goal of this system, in order for it to continue to not only thrive but function and sustain itself, will involve the continued marginalization of most men. So you should think about, will there be a point where your patience runs out, where you'll just snap and say, I've had enough of the DEI stuff, the gender bias stuff, sitting through workplace lectures and mandatory trainings about sensitivity training, things like that. And if that is, it's worthwhile you kind of building skills that you could offer yourself. And that's what you should think about. At your day job, if you lost your job due to a layoff or the slight restructuring of the industry, how could you offer that skill independently? I worked in the finance industry for over 10 years, Goldman's, Morgan Stanley, sales and trading, investment banking type of roles. I offer career advice, link in description if you want to speak with me directly. How do you feel about these future options for men in employment or men trying to make an income? Thanks for listening. 2 recommended videos on the screen right now, and I'll see you next time.